Welcome back to Hoops HD, everybody.
Woo!
Hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. It is
I
Monday,
didn't.
November
I was in jail.
27th. We don't care.
Well, you said you hoped I had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I was just
Yes, of
saying I
course.
didn't.
That's
I was in
what
jail.
everybody else. I hope they had a wonderful Thanksgiving. But this is our Hoops HD report. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood. Unfortunately, joined below me by David Griggs. Fortunately, we've got David Dorman and Joby Fortson here with us as well. Our colleague John Sleeka may or may not be jumping on as we go through here. He's recovering from
John,
a
our
rough night.
colleague John Stalika is not in a happy place right now.
He's a
Oh,
Xavier alum. He
oh.
was at the Oakland Xavier game tonight. It did not go well for Xavier. That's all we can say. We'll get to that game in a little bit here. Uh, but this is the Hoops HD report. We've got a lot of games to go over, Griggs. This was one of the busiest weeks in the entire season, was it not?
It really was, and it feels like you get to the end of November and you've been through, even though it's been 3 weeks, you feel like you've been through about 2 months. And as young as the season is, we've seen half a football season. The majority of teams all across D1 playing 5, 6 games, and there's a shape to it now. Now the shape will continue to alter and shift between now and March, but not everybody's at zero anymore.
Not everybody's at zero anymore, but I'll tell you the one team who is definitely not at zero, but is way, way better than zero is number one. In fact, in both polls, had the most impressive week of anybody, and that
And
anybody
that's the
probably
Nebraska Cornhuskers at the top of the standings.
the most impressive week that I think anybody may have all season was the Purdue Boilermakers. Dorman, let me start with you on this team, winning this Maui event, winning one of the most stacked Maui field we've ever seen before.
I think it was the most stacked Maui field ever. Was absolutely phenomenal. First, they have everything, and the transfer Jones, number 55, gives them something that they just didn't have last year. And I really like this kid. He's a Missouri Valley Conference player, but he is really athletic and he's really tough. And he gives the guards just confidence. And those sophomore guards are not freshmen anymore. Now they're sophomore, but they got Jones on the wing, and he just makes them a different team. He makes them stronger. He makes them tougher. And they just relied on this guy, not like they rely on Edey to get down and score, but he hit a big three when they needed. He went to the basket when they needed, and he's just tough. And I really think Jones brings an aspect to Purdue that they didn't have last year. In the Maui Classic, in the final, they beat a game Marquette team. Marquette is going to be phenomenal this year. I love that team Shaka's put together. Um, but Purdue was too strong. They were just that strong in every game down the stretch. Tennessee, strong, tough SEC competitor, couldn't finish the deal. They knocked off Tennessee. And Gonzaga, who stuck with them for over a half, too, because they got scores and they could score with them for a first half. But when Purdue needed a stop, they got it. I love this Purdue team.
Yeah, and Joby, we've got a lot of the metrics here now. Some of them, like the KPI and the Sagarin and the net, are not out yet. Next week we will actually have net numbers, by the way, but when we do our show. But your JNG, the SOR. What's wrong with Ken Palm only having Purdue at number two? That's my problem here.
Who's he got at one? I haven't.
I mean, Arizona, who they beat. I mean, I mean, seriously.
Okay, yeah, okay,
I
yeah,
mean,
okay.
but
I realized, yeah, Ken's a friend of ours, and I realized merit does not play a role. It's a predictive metric, but really, he doesn't have.
And there's some offseason bias that might still be in there. I
Yeah,
believe his number one is Arizona, and no, he's got Arizona at four. I'll find out who his number one is here.
well, if
Uh,
there's preseason bias,
I'm sorry.
there's
Yeah,
preseason bias,
with his
yeah.
preseason bye, it's actually Houston is his number one at the moment.
Oh,
So
Houston. That's right.
Who's played well and deserves
Very
credit,
well.
but they were on a head start. If you're doing preseason bias, just as a note, let's turn to the Big East and talk about UConn. I mean, they've been okay, and we're defending national champ. But as such, Purdue is obviously, for all the reasons stated, immediately thrust back into the role of, wow, number one seed again. Will they lose to a 16? Well, the last time someone lost to a 16, what happened the next year? I'm trying to remember. Oh, they won it all.
well, I think we're more like going to get the question: what happens when you lose to a 15 and a 16 in back-to-back years? What happens next year? But
And so maybe Jones, as Dorman was pointing out, maybe Jones represents Andre Hunter, who was hurt for the 16 game, he's that added piece that changes everything for Purdue mentality wise. Look at the Big Ten though, and both mine and strength of record, as well as Ken Pom. You'll notice though, there's a drop. Purdue's there, but the results for others haven't quite lived up fully, both in the predictive side and strength of record. It's kind of slipped back. Predictive's a little better, but it's still not where you'd want to be as a conference as a whole. And so I actually think that this is going to be a very interesting element of, can Purdue really just run out in front of everybody? Let's give Sparty, Sparty's 3-3, but the 3 losses, none of them are really that embarrassing, in my opinion. Even JMU, who's played much better, or played well down the stretch lately. It could be Purdue running away from within the Big Ten.
Right.
Big Ten will get their share of teams in, don't get me wrong, but I think Purdue could really run away and be the only protected seed, maybe.
It is kind of funny, Joey, just to see Michigan State at triple digits in the JNG and still in one of the top 25 polls. So that's.
I mean, they're 3-3. And I mean, the JNG then says, "Hey, great schedule. You're 15 and 15 at the end of the year." Is anybody getting a bid at 15 and 15?
No,
no, and no one's getting a bid. But I'm a little. Joby mentioned a good point. I mean, we'll just go for the overall average or the strength of record here. Like Purdue, obviously number one, but Illinois has a decent win. Ohio State won their event. Wisconsin, while they have 2 losses, they had the win against Virginia. And SMU, it's not like that was a home bye game. Like this, a lot of teams in this league have gone out and played, and they've gotten wins. Why aren't the numbers better? I mean, and I know we're 6 games in.
It's probably it might be too early. But he mentioned though, the next thing I want to discuss actually, Dorman, Ohio State. It's one of those seasons I didn't know what to make of them heading into the season. I think I'm going to start believing now, especially what they did to Alabama.
Totally agree, Chad. I was real high in Alabama. I was expecting them to win the game, but Ohio State took it to them, and they didn't look back. I'm with you. I'm pretty impressed with Ohio State. Then backed it up the next night against a solid Santa Clara team. But against Alabama, they were able to score with them down the stretch. And I thought that was the one thing they struggled last year, scoring the basketball, getting easy buckets. But they didn't have a problem with that against Alabama. And I'm thinking SEC, a real shot to win the SEC, Alabama, they took it right to them. I'm with you. I'm impressed with the Buckeyes.
Griggs, do we need to give a shout out to Nebraska, or is it a fake 7-0 still?
I think it's largely a fake 7-0. I think at least 6 and maybe all 7 have been home bye wins. And my thing is, they're 7-0. You got them pulled up there.
Yeah.
I did
Oregon,
like the
Oregon State neutral is the best win.
Duquesne.
Yeah, I like this Duquesne team relative to the rest of it, but 5 of the 7 games were 230 or lower. How many teams would have won all 5 of those? I think it's a fake.
We find out a lot more. Look at their next 4 games with Creighton, Michigan State, at Kansas State.
They might win the Minnesota game. Minnesota is good, but they're probably going to lose 3 of the next 4.
They should be favored against Michigan State. After all, they're in the 30s, and Michigan State's 104, and they get them at home, right?
Sure.
And we see the rest of the scores there on the screen. There were, several other teams with nice wins. Indiana, Harvard had a little bit of life heading into that game.
They did,
and did not show up that
one. They did. I was kind of disappointed in Harvard. That's more of an under the radar topic, but I did think the Hoosiers played their best game of the season against them. They have 4 wins prior to that. All 4 were weak teams at home, and they had to sweat out all 4 of them. Like they were sweating out Army.
Iowa splits the games there. They lose to Oklahoma. They do beat Seton Hall, and Penn State, 8th place at the ESPN Events Invitational, going 3. Not a good showing from the Nittany Lions.
No, Mike Rhodes is a good coach. He'll do well there. He will not do well there this year. They just don't have the players.
The upcoming schedule in the Big Ten, You could mark down a win there for Rutgers, actually. They just finished off as we started this St. Peter's tonight's game, and Northwestern, I think, is up big on Northern Illinois as we record this. But the big thing to circle here is that we are actually starting some conference play on Friday and Saturday with the 20 game conference schedule, plus the Creighton Nebraska game that we just mentioned.
Yeah.
Creighton, Nebraska, Marquette at Whiskey. That's always that's a hard one. And I think Marquette is super good. We'll get to them when they get to the Big East. As impressed as we were with Purdue, I was about as equally impressed with Marquette. I mean, anyway, we'll get to them later. But Whiskey's got their hands full in that one.
And the disappointment bowl of Michigan and Oregon. That'll be a great football playoff game, maybe, but I don't know about the basketball.
Yeah, that might be your national championship in football, depending on what happens with the Pac-12 title game. But also, it's already looking forward to Monday night. It's part of the Jimmy V Classic, the Illinois-Florida Atlantic game. That's next Monday, though. It's still a week away.
Yeah.
Huge one. Let's jump over to the how about the big no, let's go to the ACC actually. Joby, you're here. You're our ACC guy, and we got some interesting ACC games coming up this week. But starting with what happened over the past week, we're sitting there with Clemson and Miami as the two undefeated teams. Let's go into the standings.
Well, overall, the ACC has been actually better this year out of conference than last year. I don't know if last year was just a miserable disaster.
Yeah.
If your name wasn't Virginia or Duke, to be honest, and out of conference was it's been much better. I mean, even hey, North Carolina loses a great game against Villanova. I mean, okay, eye roll, that's fine. At least Carolina's done something this year out of conference. This conference will be back to giving multiple bids, 5 or 6, as opposed to scraping by with 4, with one of those being in the play-in game, or 4, but yet it was an automatic selection from Virginia Tech that got in, a couple of years ago. So I think the conference has, as opposed to the past, has established themselves in a better position. And the way you can see it is the most predictive component to the net is KenPom, because the net tries to mirror an efficiency rating. So look, while KenPom and the net are not supposed to be used purely as seedless, it at least gives you a guide. And so now you're going to have as of right now, 9 teams will give you, if you went on the road, a tier 1 win or a tier 2 home win. That's important, because that establishes, then all of a sudden, you beat a Florida. Remember, Florida State was like in the 200s last year. You beat Florida State in Tallahassee. That's a really good win. Even though Florida State's not probably going to be in the tournament right now, it boosts everything. It boosts your resume. It boosts your metrics. And so all the way down, those aren't bad metrics. I mean, even Louisville, for God's sakes, is a tier 3 win.
Louisville's won 3D1 games. One more, and they matched their total from last year.
So Louisville and Notre Dame are awful teams. I mean, and Georgia Tech you can question as well, but it's not the whole conference being pulled down. And there are multiple tournament teams in this group. I think no one would argue as of this moment that Clemson, Miami, Duke, North Carolina, Virginia have produced tournament level resumes. And you could argue about Pitt, North Carolina State, and maybe Florida State, whose only losses to Florida, who I will get to, is a very good team, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was going to say, first of all, North Carolina, you mentioned, they lost to Villanova. They did bounce back after that and beat Arkansas. So I was very impressed with Carolina on that. And Griggs, I think the team that Joby just mentioned is the one that surprised me the most. Is this Florida State team with that overtime win over Colorado?
Yeah, and that's a really good win. I think Colorado was being overvalued as a top 20 team, but I definitely think they're a top 40 team, and that's a solid win. Everything else is just sort of blah. I'm not that sold on UNLV, although I don't think it ends up being a tier 4 win. That's a lot of words to say. Yeah, I like how Florida State has played, minus the blowout loss at Florida. Now, I do have an observation about the league as a whole. I definitely think most of the teams are better, and therefore the conference is better. I'm not so sure it tops out any higher than it did last year. I think there's 2 protected seeds in Duke and Miami, and everybody else is jammed somewhere between the 6 and 11 line. Not everybody else, but everybody else that's going to be inside the bubble.
there are multiple teams in that 6-11 line. In years
Yeah.
past, that's one team last year in the 6-11 because the other team was a play-in game participant that got it.
Right. But
So
even
it's a big improvement.
Yeah, with Boston College, this helps the metrics with Boston College and in Louisville and teams like that actually winning against somebody. Last year they didn't beat anybody, not even home bye games.
And
Louisville almost pulled off an amazing upset.
Yeah, they did.
Amazing.
I mean,
God, that week, like last week, there were so many games. It's almost like 3 weeks crammed down into one. That almost feels like it was a month ago, but it wasn't. How about that? Yeah, Louisville actually did go out there and nearly beat Texas.
Yeah,
and they had that
crushed by Indiana. I mean, Indiana's a tournament level team, and they didn't get crushed.
They
Joby,
were winning the game with 3 minutes.
Yeah,
Joby, let's also not forget that he did overtime to beat a New Mexico State team that is not the New Mexico State team that everyone thinks about when you throw that name. 1 point win over UMBC. I want to see what happens with Bellarmine coming up in a couple nights.
Oh, Bellarmine's going to get him. Bellarmine's got him.
Well, I honestly think Louisville has some room to breathe when they win at DePaul. That will be that's sort of like, if you follow like English soccer, that's like a big way to get out of the relegation zone of the solid. and Louisville has the opportunity, even with a win at home. DePaul doesn't. So,
Dorman, we are going to find out a lot about the ACC over these next 2 nights. It is ACC SEC Challenge Week, 7 games each night between these 2 leagues. There they are, all those games Tuesday and Wednesday, other than the Bellarmine Louisville game. Louisville team that was thrown out of this challenge with 14 versus 15 teams there.
And ACC fans rejoice at that.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, the conference play here starting on Saturday and Sunday. So, yeah, go ahead, Dorman.
If it's possible, Miami, I really feel is like almost underrated. Coming off a Final Four march last year, I don't hear anyone singing and calling out how good Miami is. This week, they're definitely tested. Biggest test of their season. They're going into Rupp tomorrow night. I really like this Miami team. I know Griggs was on them last year early, made them look really smart. I'm on them this year. I'm on already. I think this team Larrañaga's got is really, really strong.
Yeah. What's interesting about Miami, can you pull them up real quick, Chad, is that this game tomorrow at Rupp is arguably, maybe not even arguably, it is the hardest, their biggest test until March, because while they don't go to Duke, they get Duke at home. I think going in the Rupp is a lot harder.
They do go to Carolina and to Virginia. So
you think that's I think this can, well, we'll get to them in the SEC. I think that this Kentucky team almost beat Kansas. They're really good.
Yeah, I think
they also almost lost to St. Joe's.
I think a late February game in Chapel Hill is going to be tougher. But that because of the timing and what'll be on the line at that point. But yes, this might be the toughest game left in their schedule.
Yeah.
But that's not the only big game. We've got the Clemson at Alabama tomorrow night.
That one's really big.
And Wednesday, Duke at Arkansas, Tennessee at North Carolina, A&M at Virginia. There are a lot of good games in this challenge. And then we throw in, conference play starting over the weekend with Florida State at North Carolina. And what else we got in there? We've got Clemson at Pitt. If Pitt really has anything, we might find that out on Sunday.
Yeah.
Syracuse
I think
Virginia.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, I think Pitt does have something. I don't think beating Syracuse at home will demonstrate it. It might be a while before it is demonstrated, but I do think Pitt has something.
Pitt is hosting
I'm looking
Clemson.
at NC State, Boston College.
Pitt is. Excuse me. Yeah, that not Syracuse. Okay.
Because NC State has thoughts of the tournament this year.
Yes, they do.
But they cannot lose at BC or games like that very often if they.
They certainly can. We've seen them do it all the time.
Well, then they need to beat Duke. Like they do all the time.
And they've got to go to Ole Miss on tomorrow night before they even hold ahead there to BC. So 2 tough but winnable road games. I'll put it that way. I think that's a good way to describe them. But why don't we go to the other half of this ACC SEC challenge and take a look at what happened over the past week in the SEC. Griggs, you're woohooing. Is there something you want to discuss?
Well, a lot of teams have really impressed me. I know Alabama was not, suffered a loss, but I think they're really good. I think they were probably undervalued. I really like this Kentucky team, not necessarily as a rooting fan, but just how they play. I think there's a lot of teams in this conference that are currently being undervalued. I really like Auburn. Mississippi State finally into the rankings. They should have been there sooner. Not so impressed with Missouri, but I still am a pretty big believer in Tennessee. This is just a good league.
I don't know how you say they were being undervalued when 10 out of the 14 teams receive votes in at least one of the polls here, Griggs. I think that tells me that people are paying attention to the entire SEC, aren't
Well,
they?
good. It means people are following me on Twitter. Yeah.
6. I want you to look at KenPom. 6 top 20 KenPom. 6. That means when they play each other, we're talking great metrics that will raise every bubble team. This is the conference, assuming they get out, which I think they will. I think they'll win the ACC SEC Challenge. Assuming they get out of that in a positive place with more good wins racked up on it, this conference is going to be one of those that pulls up people across the line. It'll pull over the line of Florida. It'll pull over the line in Auburn. It'll pull over the line, maybe even a South Carolina. We will.
Yeah, South Carolina. That's another one I forgot to mention. I mean, a lot of these teams have gone out, and again, they've posted these records, and it hasn't just been home bye games. They've gone out and played and won.
Yeah.
Sorry, Joby, I cut you off, but
No, you're good.
yeah.
Texas A&M looks real strong.
Yeah.
They came back from over 20 last night to a solid Virginia Tech team. Their only losses to Florida Atlantic. People are laughing that they lost. Florida Atlantic's really, really good. The Bryant game was a one-off. Don't let that fool you. Florida Atlantic's really good. Texas A&M took them right down to the wire. Impressive win against Virginia Tech last night. I think A&M's real strong.
That was Iowa State last night, I believe.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Who's even better than Virginia Tech? But yeah,
yes. I'm sorry.
Tennessee with just an awful week, though. 0-2, inexcusable 0-2 losing.
Oh,
to the number one team in the country. In the
Purdue and Kansas. How dare you? That's actually, Dorman. I want to ask you about
How
one
dare
of the
you
teams.
lose by single digits to those teams?
I'm pulling up here on the left, Eric Musselman's Razorbacks, and is it time to start worrying with this team? The losses to Memphis and Greensboro, you need double overtime to beat Stanford. I'm a little worried about this team.
I'm with you. It's time to worry. He's got talent, not like last year's squad, but Musselman's got real good talent, but the pieces seem out of place, and defensively, they're not getting the big stops down the stretch. They're defensively not seem to be on the same page. Offensively, a lot of one-on-one ball, jacking up some bad shots. I'm concerned about Arkansas. They got a huge game at home against Duke this week. That'll tell us a lot about if this team can come back, because it's been a rough week when they went down there to Atlantis.
Yeah, you might mention the upcoming schedule here, Joby. Here it is on the screen. We already looked at most of these games on Tuesday and Wednesday. Beyond that, on the weekend, it's back to bye games for the most part here. Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
I want to ask the panel about
Furman. I mean, they should. Furman's not as good as they were last year, but if they're focused all, if you're at Arkansas and you're in Fayetteville, it's Duke, and if Duke comes in, which could happen.
Oh, they're coming in.
Boat race.
They will be there.
But if they boat race them, watch out for a Furman hiccup. Yeah, I mean, it's this is why you need to worry.
Chad, before we move on,
that Memphis Ole Miss game, sneaky good game Saturday.
Ole Miss is another one. Before we move on, I want to ask, what do you guys think of Florida? I mean, we talked about Florida State.
Good.
Florida blew them out.
I've seen Florida a couple of times now against Florida State and Virginia, and I like this Florida team. They're a tournament team. I'm not saying they're going to be a protected seed, but I will be shocked if they are not in the field come March, because they've got
Well, look at
is impressive, and they've got the backcourt now.
The problem I have with this Florida team, Joby, actually, is look at this schedule. I mean, we're not going to know anything about them until January, because they should win.
Playing the ACC SEC Challenge 5 times doesn't mean.
Richmond, East Carolina, Michigan team, which I think has definitely come back down to earth. I mean, maybe that Michigan game is the only good game between now and Kentucky on January 6th.
Yeah,
but those Nets, if Florida comes in and knocks off a Mississippi State at home on the 24th, it's going to look like a heck of a win because I bet you that'll be a tier 1 win.
Then they will have their chances in conferences. That's
Yeah,
not in question here.
This is what I'm saying is that the net will pull a team up like a Florida and other SEC teams that may need a little boost here and there schedule-wise.
Yeah, and the 2 games they lost were close games against really good teams. So
let's jump over though, Griggs. Let me start with you here in the Big 12, where we mentioned Houston. There it is, that number 1 KenPom and number 1 BPI team. So if somebody's better than Purdue to those metrics, it's Houston. And we do still have 6 undefeated teams in the Big 12 as well. And Kansas, remember, Kansas has a loss. And Texas has a loss. They're not even in that group.
Well, yeah, again, those I'm not as big on Texas as I am Kansas, but pull Houston up real quick, Chad. Like, yeah, because you mentioned, and I think what it was Dayton and Utah have bloated records, and they went out there and they won pretty handily. The efficiency ratings love this team.
But again, when you look at the resume-based ones, a little bit lower. Again, KenPom, BPI. I think there's some preseason bias in those. Sagarin isn't even rating, so everybody's number 1 in Sagarin
right now. The top team in the A-Sun, so that's technically a tournament win right now. And if you get into the granularity of the J&G, so.
Okay,
you got a nice test coming up at Xavier, even though Xavier, we'll get to a minute here, did lose tonight.
Yeah, Xavier did lose tonight, but I like this Houston team a lot. I mean, you watch them and they're really good, and even against a team like Townsend who isn't good, the way I hate the term eye test because, like, I want to know. To me, the best way to prove that you're good is to beat other teams that are good. But it's hard to not be impressed with Houston. But if you're asking me, what are the teams that I like the most? Baylor, Kansas. Those are the teams that have gone out and won big games. BYU too won their
BYU, yes.
Yeah, Joby, I wanted to bring up BYU with you here. I'll pull up here on the left here. Several nice wins on
San Diego State game was made.
Yeah.
And here's what I liked about it, and obviously the focus of the Arizona State game is the fight, that occurred in the game. But the fact is, there's a reason why the fight occurred. It's because BYU was stomping them by 30 points, and Arizona State got frustrated, and Bobby control his team. The fact of the matter is, BYU has looked very much the Big 12 part early on. Everything you can hope for. And if you're the Big 12, thank you for doing that, because you're bringing up all of our resumes. I thought you'd be a suck on it. You'd be a drag on us. But it turns out, hey, you're just part of the team that's going to try to make the tournament and have every team make the tournament again or be a bubble team again. And BYU is joining the crowd along with Houston and to a lesser extent Cincinnati, who I think's also had a reasonably decent start.
Right. And Joby, one of the important things about the fight that's worth noting is that they went into that NC State game without a key player and they still dominated it.
That's an excellent point. And the BYU, hey, I think that the way BYU is played is they are not playing like, oh, that's the team that could beat Gonzaga no. This team, I think, has more of a rounded shape than those West Coast Conference BYU teams. And I'm looking forward to see how they perform in the Big 12. For all we know, they wind up 5-15.
I was just really surprised.
I don't think they will.
Yeah, the one thing about the Arizona State game, I was just really surprised that BYU got in a fight with someone and they weren't playing Utah.
Well, they will be coming up in a week and a half here, December 9th. They will be at Utah. That game is there. I also have Baylor up here on the right.
I realize that's a sensitive issue. It's every year it seems there's some sort of incident in that game. I love that rivalry, but yeah, you don't want to see stuff like that, even though it seems like year after year after year, it's always something.
Who would have thought that the highest rated team right now that BYU is set to play before Big 12 play begins is Evansville, by the way, just pointing that out.
Wow.
Dorman, real quick, a little surprised that both Oklahoma and Cincinnati are sitting here undefeated as well, especially this Oklahoma team who's got a couple wins.
Yeah, you stole my. Oklahoma looked really, really strong. Porter Moser looks like he's finally got probably his best team since going down to Norman, Oklahoma. USC, in my opinion, is really, really good, and they beat this USC team down the stretch. They got stops. They had some scores down low. They're physical. They're tough, and I was really impressed with Oklahoma. And that was after beating Iowa. They took down USC. So I'm real high on Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma has a real good chance to make the tournament this year, which I did not think was possible 2 weeks ago.
Greg, Cincinnati could be 13-0 if they win their game at Xavier, heading into Big 12 play, and then start off Big 12 season 0-13.
Well, you're right, because yeah, of the 13
Yeah.
games, 200 teams should be able to win 11 of those. I mean, they haven't left home. They've eaten at the pastry cart, and I guess the best thing you can say is, man, they're really blowing out those sub 200 teams.
We'll give them a shout out for going to Howard this week.
Yes, I like that. I like that they scheduled that, and Howard is a team that will win a lot of home games. That's actually not a bad metrics game to schedule. But when you say Oklahoma and Cincinnati, are you surprised that they're undefeated? It would have been. It's not good that Cincinnati's undefeated. It would be horrible if they weren't. That schedule.
Here's the upcoming games in the Big 12, which include beginning Thursday and going not only through the end this weekend, but into next week as well. The beginning of the Big 12 Big East Challenge Series. And the highlight game is the one everyone's going to be circling here Friday night, though. Joby, it's UConn at Kansas.
Yeah, wow. I mean, yeah, what I love is that as opposed to what you see often in college football and college basketball, we have already talked about, Arizona and Kansas and Duke and the Marquette and there's Marquette's still a 1 seed even with a loss this early in the season. Why? Because they lost to another 1 seed to get to that point. And Purdue, and it's what a great, and we're seeing another one of those games. We're going to find out. Hey, UConn, can you repeat? This is a pretty darn good test to see if they can. And even if they lose, that's still not off the table because it after all is in Allen Fieldhouse. So.
And there are a couple of really good games coming up next week as well. Next Tuesday and Wednesday, we'll get to those games next week. Actually, it's still a week away, but let's keep moving things on here.
Let me ask Dorman about a team real quick.
Okay.
Texas Tech. I know that you're
we went to Mountain West somehow. Let me find that Big 12 again. There you go. Okay.
Don't worry.
Well, you and Chad,
there when the Big 12 and
yeah, Chad is their resident radio guest. I don't know what to.
Well, they lost to Villanova, and again, Villanova had one bad day against Penn. Villanova's really good. Texas Tech stumbled, knocked their toe around against Villanova, beat Michigan handily, knocked off San Jose State. I think this Texas Tech team gets better as the season goes along and is a real I don't want to say they're going to be at the top of that Big 12, but they have a real chance to be in the middle fighting for one of those bubble spots in the Big 12. The conference is so difficult, though. They've got to rack up wins before they get there. That's why that Michigan win was so big. Villanova, obviously, I said they lost. They got to get a lot of these wins now before conference play starts. But I love the coaching with Texas Tech, and I love the pieces they have.
And the schedule, a road game at Butler is part of the Big 12 Big East Challenge, and then after that, it's pretty much all cupcakes until conference play.
Yeah.
Vandy neutral court game, again a cupcake. We have John Salika joining us, and
John,
as we go over to the Big East, John, let's start with tonight's game before we go back to Villanova. And he is gone.
John.
He left. He left.
Salika, come back. Come back.
We don't have John Salika, so let's go to Dorman. Let me go over to you instead. And you mentioned Villanova already. And how about what this Villanova team did after that Penn loss, going and winning the battle for Atlantis?
They obliterated Memphis. I mean, that was never a game. They got out 25 and never looked back. They beat a Texas Tech game, a team that I just said I think is pretty solid. Carolina was their toughest test down there in the Battle of Atlantis. Went back and forth, but they held their own in overtime, came out ahead. I was really impressed with this Villanova team. I think it's taken a year for the coach to get his footing maybe, and I think he has a stronger team than last year, dealt with a lot of injuries. But this year, they look like that Villanova energy. They look like they have that sense of team, that working for the whole team and not their individual selves. And I think Villanova's got something working here with this team. Villanova's real dangerous come conference play.
They've lifted some weight, like
Yeah.
Villanova, like North Carolina, Memphis, Texas Tech, all away from home. That's a hell of a week. That's a hell of a 72 hours.
By the way, UConn, we mentioned that they are sitting there undefeated. Creighton and Marquette. Joby, Marquette did not win the Maui, but they still were very impressive in the Maui.
Well, as our fellow panelist Matt, who's a Marquette grad, says, he's said both, I think on screen, but also off the screen, emphasized this is the most talented, best team that he's seen out of Marquette that he can remember, and he wasn't there during the McGuire years. But the fact of the matter is, this Marquette team, Shaka, I've said this before, and so I'm sorry if I'm a little broken record here. Shaka has his team that he could never put together at Texas because he's putting pieces together that want to play havoc. And it's not pure havoc. He's not doing pure havoc like VCU years, but he is playing a very strong style related to it. He's evolved as a coach. And I think that this Marquette team, wow, you got to watch it. And they're going to be a dangerous team in March by a big way. And they proved it in Maui, I might add, by beating Kansas. They've gone on the road to Illinois. UCLA is not the UCLA that's the Final Four caliber, but they are a reasonable team, and that's a good win. So, man, I love this. I love this Marquette team.
You got to look at, they beat Kansas pretty handily, and the win at Illinois in Purdue, who we were praising all over the place at the top of the show. Marquette didn't lose to them by much. It's not like they got blown out. I'm convinced that this is a Final Four caliber team.
I agree.
I know it's November, but they are. And I said that about Creighton in the preseason. I still like Creighton a lot, but this Marquette team, even more than UConn, they're the best team that I've seen out of this league. Holy cow, are they good? They might be number 2 in the nation.
Slika, are you back?
Was I ever here?
I don't know, were you? Stalika, how are you doing? And how about what happened with your Xavier Musketeers tonight?
Yeah, it was a little bit tough. They went to overtime, but the women unfortunately lost their 26th game in a. Oh wait, you wanted to talk about the other results?
The men's team, yes. Very close to a game-winning half-court buzzer beater, but was not to be.
Well, they say the third time is a charm. Well, in the case of the Oakland Xavier series, it was the 6th time, but we'll probably get into it a little bit more on Wednesday. Oakland had a couple close calls against Ohio State, Illinois. They fell short, but they really controlled the inside game tonight. They had no answer for, I think it was Trey Thompson, number 4. And if Xavier is not able to handle him, they're going to be in serious trouble come conference play if they're going to get roasted like that in the interior.
Yeah, unfortunately, they probably set up the game plan for Houston to beat them. Otherwise, Xavier had that Houston game in the bag, right?
Yeah.
Well, clearly they were looking at the wrong game plan tonight.
But in all seriousness, one other team I want to discuss here is on the right, and Griggs, and it is Creighton. And what happened with that Colorado State game?
I mean, they just blew their doors off. I still like this.
Okay, good answer.
Yeah. I want to say that I was more shocked at how good Colorado State was than at how bad Creighton was. But, they sweat out Iowa. They didn't, but I don't know. I'm still a pretty big believer in this Creighton team. They've got a decent stretch here of winnable games that are hard to win, but that they should win, going to Okie State and Nebraska.
And 3 out of 4 in the road.
Alabama
also, and then Alabama.
And then Alabama at home.
It's a real tough stretch, but they could, but it's not like they're easily going to win those 4.
Right, but if this is a top 10 caliber team, which we thought they were coming into the year, they should be able to win at least 3 of those, maybe all 4 of them. But as far as what happened against Colorado State, I don't even know.
Okay. Well, there is no answer.
Has a good team. Nico Medvedev, I know.
That is it. We'll get to them when we get to the Mountain West. Colorado State is really good.
I don't want to upset Joby.
Creighton got a rude awakening to try to join the front range. So.
Yeah.
Here is the rest of the upcoming schedule of the Big East. Not much outside of the Big 12 Big East games coming up on Thursday and Friday. A few only other notable game there will be the St. Joe's Villanova game on Wednesday. Which should St. Joe's win that game, Villanova will be playing in the 5th place game in the Big Five Challenge against Challenge Finals coming up actually next weekend against yeah. So that's Villanova's really got to win that game. They should be in the first place game if they do win it.
Just so we're clear, Joby, the city of Omaha needs to grow by about 3,500 feet to qualify for the front range.
Exactly. It's all envy. They got overcome.
Well, you know what? I was going to go to the Pac-12 yet, but if we want to go there, let's go there. Let's go Mountain West and talk about Colorado State, Joby. How about that number 20 in the AP poll, 21 in the coaches poll, 6-0 with that huge Creighton win? Is this team for real?
The sample size is Creighton, and hey, nice tier 2 win over Boston College. Wait till that falls to tier 4.
What event was that?
Look at the next 4 games they have. They've got Colorado, Washington, and St. Mary's coming up.
Yeah, well, they'll beat St. Mary's. St. Mary's has looked discombobulated. Colorado State has proven right now by getting a win against Creighton. That's the sort of win that is a deserved win out of conference. It's not some gamesmanship like, oh, we're playing these fake net teams. This is what I get on the Mountain West about. That's legit. When it comes March, and we're talking Colorado State's resume, and Colorado State has gone a solid, 14-4 or whatever in the Mountain West and all that stuff, and has that Creighton and by then Creighton could be a protected seat again for all we know. Then, hey, I'm not going to argue that Colorado State shouldn't be in the field or shouldn't be getting, be in the discussion. But let's see how it goes. But they certainly have proven it so far on the season.
All I know is the Mountain West started doing good, and Joby went halfway around the world.
Actually, I'm kind of relieved. The Mountain West has not done the job out of conference, and the example once again is KenPom. Their nets are not going to be outrageously high. There's a lot of teams in that 100 range and above 50, whereas last year it seemed like every team was ranked between 20 and 50, and it just pulled my hair out looking at it.
2 other teams to discuss here. Dorman, let me start with you with San Diego State. I know they're 5-1, the only loss being at BYU. However, they needed overtime to beat Washington, and then they needed overtime to beat Cal. So I'm a little worried here. Yeah. Yes, they're W's, but they have not been the dominant W's that you would think over teams that I think they're way better than.
I agree with you. I was shaking my head at the Cal game. I was waiting for San Diego State to show up the entire game, and they just played with them. Like you said, they beat them out in the end, but the whole game messing around with Cal. The one impressive win, I still believe St. Mary's is a very good basketball team. I could be wrong the way they've looked lately, but I think that win will look better and better as the season goes on. I saw them against Long Beach State opening night. They blew that game open in the second half. I don't think the San Diego State team is as strong offensively. It had the personnel offensively as they did last year. I worry about them being able to score with some of the higher scoring teams. But if you look at their schedule, they're going to chalk up a bunch of wins here in the next 5, 6, 7 games. Maybe Stanford or Irvine are the best teams. Irvine's not bad, but they got a lot of wins.
Irvine's an honorary member of the Mountain West this year.
A true road game at Grand Canyon. I would. Don't overlook that. Yeah,
fair. I will be looking forward to the game at Gonzaga. That will show us all a lot about both those teams.
Right. At Stalika, I got on the right there. Utah State does win their event the wins were Marshall, SFA, and Akron, but maybe a little bit of a surprising 5-1 for Utah State.
Well, they also had a nice blowout win against Stephen Austin right in the middle of the tournament, and also edged Akron, who we probably thought was going to be the team to beat in that field, and then they also add a win against Marshall. So outside of a game at Bradley, which there's nothing to be disappointed at, Utah State certainly not looking like a team that's going to be rebuilding so far. However,
Yeah, they haven't.
However, their next road game at St. Louis without their top scorer, we'll see if Utah State's able to maintain that momentum or not.
Right. Let's take a quick look at the rest of the upcoming games here in the Mountain West. Probably, I think we've already talked about most of the key games there. Akron at UNLV Tuesday, and of course the huge Colorado State game Wednesday is probably the
That
highlight
one's
for this
real
week.
big. Yeah.
Friday, Boise State, St. Mary's is a good one.
Yeah. Don't forget that Friday game there. St. Mary's is going to get back. They've got to start winning games like this one.
I also have to applaud San Diego State right here. They're not playing San Diego, but they found room in their schedule for UC San Diego and Point Loma within the city.
Hey, all right. Let's jump over. We mentioned some of these St. Mary's. So let's jump over to the West Coast Conference while we're here. And Joby, is it looking like Gonzaga and nothing at this point? Especially if St. Mary's doesn't have it.
Well, if St. Mary's doesn't have, it's probably where it is. But Santa Clara has actually jumped out with a solid win against Oregon on a neutral court. So that's going to be strong. They beat Stanford away. So Santa Clara, they've got to be amazing in the Mountain West. Don't get me wrong, but they have some touch points that you go, well, okay, especially since we haven't gotten to the team out west. Like the Mountain West probably has 3 bids right now. You could argue 2 right now for the West Coast. We haven't gotten to the other conference that might be a 1 bid or 2 bid league out west. So that Santa Clara has blown the doors through right now. So, but yeah, no, Santa Clara has done well for themselves. They need to continue. They need to beat Cal on the road. They need to continue to win against that inferior Pac-12 conference in Washington State, et cetera. So.
And St. Mary's, I will pull them up here on the left against Gonzaga, and you see already those 3 losses. Only win of note really is New Mexico. They are going to be playing Utah tonight as we record this. It's around 10 p.m. in about an hour from now. And then they got the Boise State, the game at Colorado State, UNLV. There are the chances here still remain non-conference, in addition to the Gonzaga and the Santa Clara games, Griggs.
They do, but now the question isn't do they have the chances? It's just are they even good? Because it's not that they've had chances and missed. It's that they haven't even looked that good. San Diego State, we touched on them about how they've been a little bit underwhelming. They got blown to the moon. Xavier, who just lost to Oakland, beat them down rather handily. In Weber State, good Big Sky team, but is St. Mary's even good? This is a team that we thought would be a protected seed. They're not even looking like an NIT team.
There is no
completely different Xavier team because they actually played defense against the Gales. It was non-existent tonight.
But there is no. If you are an at-large team, you should not lose ever to a Big Sky team at home, even if it's the best team in the Big Sky. It just
right.
You should not lose it.
I agree with everything Greg said. I'm going to buy low. I'm a big believer in Coach Bennett. I think he gets the ship turned around here, and I think St. Mary's gets going here and puts up a very solid resume.
Well, it really starts this week with Utah tonight.
Yes, it does.
Boise State Friday. This is huge.
2 must wins.
Yeah, meanwhile, Gonzaga USC Saturday. Don't forget to circle that game. Talk West Coast.
Boys, we didn't touch upon them. They've been kind of disappointing this year, but I bet they beat St. Mary's.
Joby, you want to talk about the other conference out west? How about the Pac-12?
Look at that red. Oh my goodness!
Oh my God! You're right.
This is under the radar conference type of.
And one of the only wins is over Vanderbilt. So,
yeah.
This is. How many bye games they?
Oh Lord!
But anyway, actually, it's not a lot of bye games they lost.
A lot of these were
Colorado. I do like Colorado. I'm just going to lay out. I think Colorado's a tournament team. All my shtick, etc. I think Colorado's going to do nothing but improve. The problem is, and Arizona, no question. Arizona is going to look lonely, though, in the same way that Duke started to look lonely last year. It's like, where can they get a good ACC win? I think Arizona is going to be like kind of stuck. If they want to keep that 1 seed, they're going to have to go like a ridiculous. Are there 20 games in the Pac-12? They have to go like 18-2 or something. It's like ridiculous to keep that 1 seed, even with the great win in Durham. So, this conference has really fallen on hard times out of conference. Though I will say this, I don't understand it. I don't know where Ken Palm's getting those numbers from because UCLA's looked awful. I do. I think UCLA's looked
I think
awful.
they've looked all right.
Preseason bias.
Yeah, there has to be preseason bias in there.
Well,
USC, I don't think I don't. I mean,
well,
USC
Joby,
is okay, but
K-State and Seton Hall have decent wins for USC. Don't write them off yet.
right.
yeah,
Right.
it
USC
looked
is
like
good.
UCLA lost to
K-State's going
Gonzaga.
to finish 4-16 in the Big.
Yeah, I hate to point at losses to make a case for a team, but I mean they lost to Marquette by 2 and Gonzaga by 4.
Yeah.
So
Two teams that
if
could
you
go
look
to
at a
the Final
predictive metric like
Yeah.
Ken Palm, that's a damn good showing.
Okay, well, we're going to get answers on both these teams in the next couple of weeks. UCLA has at Villanova and Ohio State coming up.
They won't
USC
win.
has the Gonzaga game, also a trip to Auburn coming up. So there are a lot of answers we will still have before we even get to conference play on both these teams. But I think it may be too early to write the two Southern Cal teams off.
True
Joey.
enough. Well, I haven't liked necessarily. I guess UCLA. That's true because we do love Marquette, and I do love Marquette as well. But I won't write off UCLA. USC, I've seen a few times. They look. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not impressed with Seton Hall or Kansas State as well. So it's not like those games are really. Those are two at best NIT teams they beat. And as a matter of fact, Kansas State will be ineligible for the NIT because they'll have a losing record.
Yeah.
The rest of the upcoming schedule, maybe they can get a little less redneck this next week here. I think we're back to a lot of bye games. We mentioned some of these games already. The Circle coming up on Saturday, Michigan and Oregon as another game to watch.
That Colorado State game, we talked about it already.
Yeah.
That one is going to be awesome. Like whatever, make sure you catch that one. I don't know what channel it's on, but like the intensity of that game, it's one of those, it's almost like Providence, Rhode Island. People, it doesn't have like the national following, but when you do watch it, you're like, oh my God, this is a bloodbath.
Salika,
It's a rivalry.
over in the American, we touched on it a little bit earlier, this Florida Atlantic team fresh off of their victory in their whichever event they were in.
It was the
Was that
ESPN events.
The ESPN Events Invitational. Thank you.
No, I like how you said whichever event they were in. ESPN has not bothered to name it. It's just the ESPN event.
Stalika, how about this FAU team? Have they put that Bryant loss in the rearview mirror at this point?
I'm sorry, Puppet, but Old Spice isn't worthy enough to carry Florida.
What about
Atlantic's
Advocare?
jock
Whatever
here.
happened to Advocare or whatever else they used?
Okay, back to the question, Stalika.
But this is a team that got progressively better as the tournament wore through. I mean, they did have a shootout against Butler where they did manage to survive and not fall into the 5th and 7th place game. So they're able to get a win against a nationally ranked Texas A&M and just blew the doors off of Virginia Tech, who apparently managed to sneak into the title game.
Yeah, and they've got some really good games coming up here. This Liberty game, undefeated Liberty team out of Conference USA, Charleston, Illinois, the Bonnies, Arizona. There's a lot of very interesting non-conference games left for FAU in the next couple of weeks. Dorman, how about Memphis though? Over the right there, just missed the top 25 in both polls.
Yeah, I think that was due, if I had to guess, to the way they lost to Villanova. 16, it shows on our screen, which I know is correct. They were down 30. They just were never in this game. I think that's why the voters just couldn't get them in the top 25. But I think Penny has a good team here. I think they have some really nice pieces. They're older, actually. They're more experienced, which is usually not the case in Memphis. Usually they're
older than some NBA teams, aren't they?
Like the average age was like 23 or something. 24 is like crazy to see on the screen. So I think Memphis and Penny will get this team on track and get stronger as the year goes on. But I mean, Arkansas, Michigan, those are good wins. That's a nice start to the season. They just got blasted by Villanova. Everyone has a bad day. They got an interesting game this weekend at Ole Miss. That'll be interesting. Ole Miss is undefeated, I believe. And then going to A&M. So, and then Clemson.
And
the schedule is loaded.
Stretch of A&M,
Clemson,
Virginia. That's 3 tournament teams.
Show us how good you are.
Virginia. What?
This is how you need to schedule non-conference if you're playing in the American also.
Yeah, it is. And good for them for doing it.
Because VC, even going to VCU, I think VCU won't wind up 160. I think it'll wind up being, if they can get it, who knows? They could get since it's on the road, it could easily become a tier 2 win. I think VCU will be in the top 135. So that's a nice job.
One of the big surprises, and I know that their schedule they haven't lifted the weight that FAU or Memphis has had, but what about Wichita State? Like this was a team that we were not big on coming into the year. I wasn't.
Okay, Griggs. So they beat Western Kentucky and St. Louis. They got blown out.
Well,
by
like I
Liberty.
said, what about Tulane?
Okay, I'd rather say what about Tulane, because we actually were a little bit big on Tulane heading into the season. They also have the Bradley loss, but they haven't played anybody else.
Bradley's good.
Really.
Bradley's real good. Yeah,
Bradley's solid.
Is at large. Well, the J&G has Bradley as a 3 seed right now because wins that we've seen.
Here's my question for the panel: does a third team get inside this bubble?
Well, here's the thing. We just talked about what you do with the Memphis non-conference schedule. This is what you don't do. Southern, Prairie View. You've already played Nichols and Sacramento State and Northwestern State. You're only
Dillard.
non-conference game.
They can buy some good clothes at Dillard's.
Only one true road non-conference game. It's at Fordham. I mean, Fordham's decent, but it's not. That's why they don't make it if they don't make it at the end of the day.
Right, and SMU is off to a good start. Does a third team get inside the bubble, or is it FAU and Memphis?
Inside the bubble, no. Can they steal a bid? Possibly.
Yeah, anybody can steal a bid.
I think can a team overcome in a tournament realistically Memphis, because they'll probably have to go through both of them. Memphis, Florida Atlantic, maybe SMU. SMU had Wisconsin down a little bit in the championship game after beating West Virginia like a drum, and so SMU could. I'm not. Are they going to be able to put together a resume that's at large worthy? I don't know, but they have some fighting.
Yeah.
Upcoming schedules here: LaSalle Temple, just circled that Wednesday night. That will determine who plays in the championship game, probably against Villanova of the Big 5 Classic, and the Liberty Florida Atlantic game is on Thursday. It's actually is a real interesting game if I get onto the radar team. And we already mentioned Memphis and Ole Miss on Saturday, another big one. And Florida Atlantic, Illinois coming up Monday also. But let's see here. What's
keep an eye on Wichita State and Missouri, because that's going to be a winnable game for the Shockers come Sunday.
Yeah, Mizzou been kind of disappointing this year. We didn't even really talk about them when we talked about the SEC. But you're right, John. That's a game they can win.
Joby, should the Atlantic 10 even be on the show anymore?
Oh, my God.
Oh my God, no. I mean, when GW is your top team, and and I go, hey, GW 58 in the JNG, but no, they're probably more like Ken Palm.
Okay, but hold on a second here, Griggs.
Just awful.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Griggs, look at a lot of blue, only a little bit of red. Now let's go back to the Pac-12 again. Exact opposite.
From Atlantic to Pacific.
Looking at the big, GW and Mason have won home bye games. They've won the games they're supposed to win. What is the best win that any team from this conference has managed so far? And it wasn't even against an NIT team.
Maybe Rhode Island beat Yale.
Rhodey beat Yale. Okay, that was probably it. And
I was going to say Dayton's win over St. John's, maybe, but
I mean, truth be told, right now GW over Delaware on a neutral court. Now, I'm not kidding when I say that.
Yeah, Delaware's not bad, but the point is, why isn't this league better? And we're going to go to the GNG. For starters, it's our metric. For second, the guy that builds it is right here. And what you have, if I'm reading this right, is 2 NIT teams or 1?
2. 88. I can pull it up. LaSalle right now is the last NIT. The last. And there are no bid stealers in the NIT this year.
Yeah.
Because I'm including the fact that because they're so good, the Big 12 has to pull one team from outside the top 32 at larges because all their teams are in the NCAA tournament. So.
Yeah, but no one in this league has
so they
built.
do UCLA out. Yeah. So
No one in this league has built any sort of a profile, and I don't know if any of them are good enough to do it. I do like Duquesne, at least in comparison to the rest of the league, but they missed their chances. Like they didn't win at Nebraska, and while Nebraska's unbeaten at home, they're unbeaten against a bunch of under the radar bad teams. The College of Charleston went on a neutral floor at the time, looked pretty good, but they had to sweat out Cleveland State, and they didn't exactly bury Stony Brook. Who else?
And no chances left here, really. Santa Clara, just Santa Clara and Bradley, but
Dayton,
those aren't going to catch anyone's attention. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, Dayton. I know they lost a really key player coming into the year, but they haven't. Yeah, it's just is anybody. It's not that they haven't done it yet, although. It's okay. I should say it is that they haven't done it yet, but it's more than that. Is anybody actually good enough to build a resume that would land them inside the bubble? And I don't think they are. And that is a sad thing for me to say. I love this league. How do you not love?
I will Griggs, I'll just throw it out there. Somebody needs to almost run the table here in the conference, and then you're inside the bubble. Short of that, I don't think it happens.
And if St. John's gets in the upper half and is a bid worthy, they're not right now. But if the Johnnies became bid worthy, then all of a sudden you go, well, or LSU, hey, well, they at least beat a large level team. Show that amazing record of 25-5 is not totally
backed up.
And I'm not beating up on the A-10 just because I like treating it like a piñata. I love this league. Part of the Big Five is in this league. St. Bonaventure is a really special basketball culture. So is Dayton. It's one of the best fan bases in the country. Look at some of the rivalries and some of the programs in this. But this league, it has been garbage the last 2 years. Yeah, and it should be better. Why isn't this league better?
We do have some good games this week, though. We have two Big Five games on Wednesday as part of the Big Five Classic. Saturday, Rhode Island, Providence. Also, St. Bonaventure, Buffalo. At least those will be fun to watch, regardless of the records. But that's all I got that's all I think we have for the A-10 for this week.
To Chad's point, it could very well be after Christmas. They're not on this show anymore.
Yeah, there's a major rivalry you're missing on Wednesday.
I saw the Norfolk State VCU. I thought you meant Norfolk State VCU, but
I don't know. You need to remind us what Davidson and Charlotte are playing for.
Yes! Yes!
I don't even think we have that anymore.
We will get it back. Yes.
We will get that back. We'll talk about that maybe on Under the Radar here coming up. We'll talk about no, Charlotte's not under the radar anymore, are they? Neither one's under the radar. We'll see if we can find that Davidson Charlotte game. But meantime, we have one other team to discuss, and that is James Madison, 6-0, first place in the Sun Belt. But we're discussing them now because they are in the top 25 in both polls. I'll pull them up here on the left here. Joby, is this team for real?
This is an at-large team. They're not.
I mean, are they going to stay there though?
They're not the J&G. No, they won't remain a protected seed. Okay, but are they? I mean, they can afford a few slip-ups in this awful Sunbelt League, which Sunbelt didn't used to be this bad. But let's look at even what they've done besides the obvious, which is in East Lansing. Those are good wins. Fresno is part of this Mountain West, fake. Let me fake a schedule. It blew up in their face. And then at Kent State, nice win. I know that it was overtime. We all saw it. It was just they probably should have lost it, but they definitely should have lost it actually. But the fact is, they do have the win listed up there. They're taking care. In the Fresno game, 31 points. So it's not like it was some fluky sort of thing, as opposed to the Kent State one. JMU's a good team.
Southern Illinois solid.
I think that they are going to be able to not run the table, but win enough and not slip up enough to be at large worthy. The unfortunate thing for them is all I have to do is look at that schedule, and there is not one double-digit game left. They've done what they've had to do. That's all you can ask. Now just don't lose to South Alabama.
I will throw this in there, that TBA on February 10th will be against a Mid-American Conference team. That matchup will be set in January, so it should be the best team in the MAC. So hopefully but that is probably but it'll be a home game too. That's the only tough game left on this calendar.
And let's say is an 80. realistically, let's say it's an Akron that's 80. That's a tier 3 win.
Yeah, it's not special. Nothing special.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
not like that.
A win
Maybe
in Michigan
maybe
State could move up, could look better in weeks.
yeah, and maybe some of these numbers get better better from these other teams also as we get a little more data here for these teams. But on that note, I'm gonna go ahead and pull down the screen share, run through each of you for any other final thoughts on the night. Dorman, why don't I start with you?
Yeah, I know there's some big conference games start right off the bat this weekend. But before we get there, like we've talked about, some huge out of conference showdowns: UConn and Kansas, Arkansas and Duke, Kentucky and Miami. Those are going to play big factors in all these data points and all the metrics going forward. So there's a lot of great out of conference games before the conference gets started. Some great action this week.
There is, and Sleek, I'll go to you next. But before I go to you, I'm going to pull up what you were trying to reference earlier because I do have the picture still. Go ahead. I'll let you take this for your final thought too.
Well, I'm going to go back to the Sun Belt right here that Joby had referenced. I believe he had James
Chet,
Madison
I'll incorporate that into my final thought.
as a number 3 seed this week. Now, I had to look this up. The highest seed a team from the Sun Belt ever got was in 1985. VCU had a number 2 seed, believe it or not.
Wow.
Unfortunately, they lost in the second round to Alabama and the Wimp.
All right, before we get back to what was on our screen, Joby, let me delete you your final thought. Then Griggs wants to hit that on his.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about the J&G, and one of the reasons why, check out the website. The bracket up right now is a seed list compiled using the J&G as a guide. Like I said, you'll see if you go to the J&G page, you will see a seed list, and I'm hoping to update it every single day for the most part through March. I might miss a day or two around Christmas, but you'll see it updated constantly. The net, when it comes out, will make the J&G very live. Right now, we're using a preseason bias second hand, but it's still it's done off results, not just pure preseason bias. And so I would encourage everybody to go to it. It's up on Massey right now, as well as one of the computer metrics, and should be up on Bracket Matrix when they expand beyond the 20 or so they have. And Bracket Matrix will start expanding it in December. So keep that, and it's the best computer predictor that doesn't take emotion into it for your bracket projections.
Right up there at the top, check the J&G tab there as well. Griggs, I'm going to turn back to you. Put this back on the screen.
Yes.
Charlotte
Okay.
Davidson are playing this week. Tell us
Yes.
about it and finish the show off.
Well, okay, the first thing I wanted to say, going back, I'm looking at Colorado State now, and the way they beat Creighton was they now stay with me here. They shot better, they defended better, and they rebounded better. Other than that, Creighton was right in there.
And they scored more points too.
And they
right?
scored a lot more points. But what we have on the screen, and for those of you listening, I'm very sorry you can't see what it is, but it looks like a giant pile of crap, like literally a big turd on a trophy. Now, what amazes me the most about this trophy, which is it's not the Stanley Cup or the World Series, this is the greatest trophy in all of sports as far as I'm concerned, was how it was constructed.
The Hornet's Nest.
Somebody tried to construct a hornet's nest, finished it. It looked, instead of a hornet's nest, like a big pile of crap, literally, and stepped back and look at what they created, and they're like, yeah, that looks good. I did a good job with this. Let's make this the trophy. And that's amazing. And what's even more amazing is both Davidson and Charlotte said, you know what? You're right. This is our trophy, this big pile of hornet crap.
Charlotte and Davidson playing for the Hornets Nest title. That game is, when do we say that game is going to be?
Wednesday.
Wednesday. Should be the only game you watch Wednesday. Forget about those ACC, SEC challenge games.
Does that rivalry have a name, like the backyard brawl, the cross?
The Hornet's Nest.
The Hornet. No, the Hornet. The pile of Hornet crap.
Let's get out of this show. I think we've lost it. Thanks for joining us, everybody. On behalf of David Dorman, Joby Fordson, John Stalika, David Griggs, I'm Chad Sherwood. We'll be back later this week with an Under the Radar, and
Hornet
right back
crap
at you
classic.
next week. Good night.